from Glen Avon to the summit towers of Ben Avon. This is a long day out in the Cairngorms, a bike and hike round trip of 40 kilometres. The Cairngorm Mountains are the heart of the northeast of Scotland, with the largest expanse of high-level plateaus and the 5 next highest mountains in Scotland after Ben Nevis. Today we are heading for the most easterly summit of the central Cairngorms, Ben Avon. Starting from just outside the small village of Tomintoul, it's a 12-kilometre cycle to the Glen Avon, then an 8-kilometre hike to the summit, with an ascent of almost 3,000 feet. That's a round trip of 40 kilometres, 25 miles. The village of Tomintoul has cafes and restaurants, whisky shops and hotels, but you'll need another day for most of that, as we are starting early and won't be back till late. We can start our cycle from here, but there is a small car park nearly a mile in where you can usually get a space. Tomintoul is the highest village in the Highlands, and so at 1150 feet it gives us a good start on the almost 4,000 feet of Ben Avon, which is just one of the 49 summits that are over 3,000 feet in just the central Cairngorms. That's 18 Munros and 31 Munro tops. If you are heading up the mountain at any time from August to October, excepting Sundays, it would be best to contact the estate to see if there will be any stocking on your route. I'll leave links in the description. This end of the glen is more correctly Strathavon, with the River Avon meandering through it. We will be staying on the east side of the river and won't be crossing it on this trip. From the small car park, it's 12 kilometres, 7.5 miles on a mostly decent gravel track and tarmac, so a full mountain bike is not essential. We'll be parting with the bike at the Glen Avon, which is just past the big Inchrory house. The word Avon is pronounced differently in the old Scottish Gaelic language. There it can be pronounced Ann, which is why you might still sometimes hear people saying Ben Ann or Loch Ann, but like most Scots I don't speak Gaelic, so I prefer Avon. If you look closely along the banks of the river, you can make out remnants of the long ruined buildings of old settlements that once existed here. I don't know specifically about this glen, but it is known that some other glens in the Cairngorms were victim to the highland clearances of the late 1700s, when crofter tenants were moved off the land to make way for more profitable sheep farming. Of course, human presence here dates back a lot longer. Archaeological works in Glen Avon found Neolithic stone arrowheads, with one believed to be between 5,000 and 6,000 years old. Another abandoned farmstead where one cottage remains. I did find a reference to someone being born there in the 1880s. I don't know when it became derelict, only that it was so the first time I saw it, some 20 years ago. When we reach here, we're 4.5 miles in, with 3 miles of cycle left. This type of U-shaped valley is common across the Cairngorms and was shaped and smoothed by the flow of ice, the glaciers that came and went during more than a dozen ice ages in the last couple of million years that covered most of Scotland. The high plateaus of the Cairngorms are often described as having an Arctic environment, so they need to be treated with respect, and not just in the winter months, but at any time of year. I have personally experienced horizontal sleet and hailstones up there in August. That's Inchrory House. I don't know who owns it now. Local gossip says overseas royalty. The Glen Avon estate was sold in 1995 to a company registered in Malaysia. Coffee stop and a chat with a complete stranger. Hello again if you see this. I like to hear other people's stories. The stream is the Bullig, which joins the Avon the other side of the bridge. We are branching off left and taking the track there going uphill. But carry on straight for a bit if you want to get a look at the Glen of Avon. The word Lyn in Scots can mean waterfall or rapids, ravine or just rushing water, somewhere the river narrows. If we follow the river upstream from here through Glen Avon, in 11.5 kilometres, 7 miles, is the old Finduran Lodge, a remaining part of which is now an open bothy. The track does get rougher as you go from here, so a decent mountain bike would be desirable. After that, much of the going is not bike suitable for the further 8 kilometres, 5 miles, to the source of the river, Loch Avon. A magical place and one of my favourite spots in the Cairngorms. But that's for another video. Back to today, I like to start up the track and find somewhere to leave the bike in the heather. This Land Rover track leads to a small area where I guess you might see a vehicle or two parked here in stalking season, though I've never seen any. From here you might notice some narrow paths running more directly up the hill, but that way can be boggy and rough in places, and while slightly shorter is not really any quicker than the track, which continues on for just a bit before turning up. The narrow path is slower going and not advisable in really wet conditions. The old track is easier, passing what I assume is a firing point for the shooters. Hopefully one day soon leisure tourism in this area will be more profitable to the estate than the killing. Both paths take us to the last of the steepest section of the walk. At this point, the gradient eases a little for the last part of our main ascent. In a couple of places you can see here that the path becomes vague and is easy to lose, but keep heading for the right of the summit. And watch out for a small cairn. When we reach here, we are at nearly 2,800 feet, with just over 1,000 to go, most of which is a much gentler gradient for the remaining 5.5 kilometres, 3.5 miles. The granite tors and outcrops all around this area are definitely one of the highlights of this walk. It would take days just to explore the half of them. Some of the footage here is from a previous walk. I couldn't find out what connection this lady had to Glen Avon, only that she was born and lived and was buried in the south of England. On with our walk, the path is clear to follow. That's the first time I've seen one of those up here. The white lines on the ground there are animal tracks, paths created over centuries by red deer and perhaps also sheep. This corrie is just out of sight from the route of today's walk. There are no paths to it, and it would be a lengthy detour, adding a couple of hours to our hike. Best left for another day so you can spend some time and enjoy. This was filmed in August 2024. This was 10 months earlier in the previous October, just after the first light snow of the year, which usually marks the end of my walking season. Onwards again. You may notice here that the obvious path looks about to end. A route to this point is clearly shown on the map, but the path drawn does end at that spot. However, there is a discernible path for about another kilometre before it does indeed end, from which point we are entirely on our own. When you cross the little stream, head straight and keep the small gully on your right in sight until you have a definite path again. Then follow across the gully. On your way back down, watch out for the point here where you crossed the gully, as the path also continues straight on. In just a little bit, the path turns almost sharp right to take us uphill again. From here, we are going literally dead straight until we summit the plateau. The big tor there is well left of where we are heading. At the end of the path, we are going up the bank directly in front of us. We don't want to come back this way. When we crest the rise, we will on a clear day see our destination, still 2 kilometres away. Always heading for the highest ground is our best route. Now, we will of course need to retrace our steps to get back to the path, so look around as you go so you know the ground. Now let's be clear, you should not be up here unless you have the ability to navigate in poor or zero visibility. Losing your bearings here could literally cost your life. There are just too many ways to go wrong in such a vast expanse of moor and marsh and bog and gullies and cliffs. You could walk into trouble or walk for several hours and not find a path or a road. Digital devices are fine, but you should have backup in the form of map and compass and the knowledge to use them. There are plenty more tors around here to explore. Next to these, just off the west of the plateau, is this. It can't be natural, and I doubt it could have been a shelter of some kind. A grave, perhaps? If anyone has an idea, please leave a comment. just under a kilometre to go. Remember, the aerial footage is deceiving. The scale of it and the distance on the ground is a lot more than it looks from high above. If you want weather like this when you are up here, then you need to pick your day. On any trip into the mountains, you should know the weather forecast. Never just hope for the best. Winds up here can be fierce, rain or snow can sweep in, clouds can descend, and it all can change hour by hour. There are many good mountain weather forecasts, and the Met Office even has a daily one specifically for this summit. Links in the description. Standing by these tors, take a moment to reflect that they have been slowly weathering here since long before human beings ever existed on this planet. The bedrock of the entire central Cairngorms is granite, magma that solidified slowly deep underground 400 million years ago near the equator. As plate tectonics carried it northwards, continental break-up and collisions raised the land into mountains that by 50 million years ago stood at least 5 times higher than what we see today. Tens of thousands of millennia of weathering and erosion eventually wore the mountains down to expose the tougher granite, which itself has been slowly weathering over many millions of years. This is the tor we were looking up to earlier before we reached the plateau. Its name, Clach Cootsach, means Coots Stone or Stone of the Coots, which refers to Clan Coots, a prominent Highland clan in this area 500 years ago. There are 3 other tors to the east of here with the same name, one of which is known for a last stand in a decisive clan battle in which the Coots clan were heavily defeated. It's thought the high areas of the Cairngorms were not much changed by the repeating ice ages. Any snow and ice cover was likely frozen to the ground and so didn't move enough to cause major erosion to the tors. The tor's smooth and rounded look is thought to be more the work of just countless millennia of frost and wind and rain. As long as you don't go trying to climb anything, there hasn't been any dangerous terrain on today's walk. Don't forget, we still have another 20 kilometres to do to get home.